Sure. My name is Rob Brunswick. I'm going to be kind of like the narrator here. We got my friend Christian here reporting him live from a beach. And then my friend Nick Rinaldi, who's just about to take off on his way back to New York on the plane. He cannot really present with us today, unfortunately, but he did take a big part and play a big part in this presentation here. So we'll get things going. It's a hard Knicks life, if that isn't real life. That's me, as you all know now. And just a little bit about me as you read these little bullet points here. My name is Rob Brunswick. I'm a huge Knicks fan. I have been since the Insanity days. I haven't let it go. And I'm just considered myself, I guess, a little bit of an addict of basketball. As a matter of fact, a lot of this presentation is based off of some of my activity on Knicks Twitter myself. I have an account there that I started up a couple years back. I have a website that I write a bunch of blogs about the games and, you know, performances and this and that, just little op-ed type of stuff. My friend Nick actually has also contributed to that. I create some designs that I post up on Instagram. I cover a whole bunch of stuff. You know, I do YouTube videos, but mostly tweet activity at this point. And basically that's what we're using here as like a template for the data analytics part of the presentation. Not just me, but more so Nick's Twitter altogether. Christian will dive into that actually as we move on. So we'll move on to that as we speak, actually. This is actually a table of some of the data that Christian put together for us. It's a few of the tweets from my account, actually. One of which is...
Rob, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, feel free.
Absolutely. So what we're doing, how we're starting is we're doing a Twitter analysis, right? So I don't know if you've ever been on Twitter concerning basketball, but people are always tweeting, especially Rob. And so what you're able to do, and the open data part of this, is you're able to scrape all the tweets regarding either a user or a specific word, right? So here, using especially our tweet package, I pulled all of Rob's tweets, right? All that he's ever done. And the limit, I think, is sketchy, but there's 90 different columns. And so this is just a little snapshot, and I'm happy to answer more questions about pulling the data or just the data in general if you guys have. So, Rob.
Yeah, I'm going to move on to the next one here. You're probably going to want to chime in on this again, Christian. You know more about this than I do, as you said. Here. So yeah, go ahead. Take the floor, my man.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we wanted to do, because it is tweets and there's a lot of words, is we wanted to run a lexicon analysis. The first thing we did, and somewhat of the example, is we ran a lexicon analysis of all of the Rambles from the Garden tweets. And so the first step is to obviously pull them. And then the second is to what we call like tidy. And you unnest the data. So with unnesting, you actually take every word from each tweet and make it its own row. So imagine that you pull 3,000 rows, each word, and now that could turn into 10,000, 20,000, 100,000, depending on how big the tweets are. And so that's the unnesting part. The second part is removing stop words, right? So that is up to the discretion of the person. Me personally, I am somewhat of a word hoarder, but it's typical to remove words such as the and a when we're talking about Twitter data like http.com, etc. And so this can be done with any document, you know, a thesis, a letter, anything. And so if we're looking at this, you can see that it's colored and there's somewhat of a radius, right? So Knicks is the most used word by Rob on his Rambles from the Garden Twitter. That's covered in yellow. And so the yellow is the first largest categorical group. Then it goes to the kind of purplish, then blue, red, and then green. One thing, and shout out to Rob, he's a great friend, is that he mentions Nicky Dimebags, who is Nick Rinaldi, a co-author of this project. Rob, you know, he's got a little bit of a potty mouth. He does say the F-bomb a couple of times.
I did want to call that out. Just ignore the top left corner of that graphic there.
And then, I mean, you guys...
Oh, Christian looks like he cut out a little bit. Don't know where he was going with that, but I guess he was just... Well, I think he was just...
At any time, myself.
All right. So yeah, technical difficulties on Christian's end. I think he was just going into the fact that you could, as you look around this word graphic, you kind of just see the context of a lot of the tweets that I've mentioned. For instance, if you look at this top left part here, I love Quentin Grimes, who has been a growing factor of this Knicks team. Kemba Walker, who was signed in the offseason, who wound up being a failed experiment. A lot of crap talking about him, you know what I mean? I talk with my one good friend who runs this account, Mavs Draft, a lot about, you know, his ideas on upcoming draft prospects, even just like his thoughts on basketball, other basketball players in the league, on the Mavericks, on the Bucks, on the Nets, et cetera, et cetera. So this lexicon analysis, as Christian was kind of just pointing out, is basically a culmination of a lot of the words that I use as I'm tweeting about the Knicks. So moving on, then I would say.
I think I'm back. Can you hear me?
Now I hear you, yeah. And I think we kind of covered the whole lexicon thing well. So I just moved on to the sentiment.
Great. So with the sentiment analysis, it is predicated off the lexicon analysis. What you do is with the tidy data that you have, you take all the words, right, they're all separated in rows, and then you pair them with the sentiment dictionary. The one that I particularly like to use is the NRC one. It's, you know, pretty well known. And what I like about it is that it categorizes each word into particularly different emotions, sentiments. And so that is fantastic that you can see that Rob has a lot of positive words, but also there's a lot of negative and stuff like that. Rob, I don't know if you want to talk about how you feel about the Knicks right now to really describe what's going on.
I mean, as you can kind of see, it's a conflicted point of view here. I try to be more optimistic the more I continue watching this team, because I have seen a lot of bad basketball for the past 10 years. And there are older fans than me that have seen worse. So, but I do try to remain positive. As you see kind of from each cluster, there are some ways you could compile it where it's more positive generally than negative. But I do see both sides of the story here. As a matter of fact, at the timing of this presentation, the Knicks just lost a game last night, not by much, to the second best team in the Western Conference, Memphis Grizzlies. And they kind of blew a double-digit lead, but whatever. One of the better teams in the league. Can't be too mad. But they did just come off of a 3-game win streak where they blew out the teams that they played. And they, you know, that kind of heightens the positivity. Knicks are currently fighting their way into a play-in spot and hopefully the playoffs eventually. So, you know, I like to keep a more positive light and try to manifest that for them, because obviously I can't play on the team. Otherwise I would be dropping 30 points a game and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think, Carol, I see you laughing down there. So yeah, the sentiment stuff, really interesting stuff from the data part. Christian and Rinaldi did a lot of this work. So cool to see that play out. And then I guess we can now take this to the next slide, which is another version of I guess it's called a time series. While Christian takes his time coming back in, I'll just describe what I know about it. But essentially, this is just a table of the tweet activity like over the course of the season. As you can see, there's kind of like a spike in January. I don't know the technical stuff of how this stuff is pulled. I guess it's just, you know, whatever programs they use. And so to describe the spikes per se. So if you look in the bottom left, you see around here, July. This is after the playoffs. Knicks get bounced in the first round. There's a lot of activity here because people are like, what's going on? Some people are happy. Some people are mad. A lot of discussion going back and forth. Letting into July, you see a lot of the activity where the draft and free agency takes place. So there's going to be a spike in activity there. I think that's around the time when Kemba Walker got signed as well, by the way. So people kind of just start freaking out about that stuff. And then as time keeps moving on, season picks up in October. The Knicks start off hot. Everything looks great. And then takes a swift decline, which I believe played a part in this big spike here, which kind of detailed where Julius Randle starts playing a little bit more poorly than he did last year, though he was the most improved player in the NBA. And everybody was kind of high on Julius here. I think Knicks fans felt invincible after last season, and this kind of shows that their vulnerability is very high still. And then even jumping ahead
Rob,
now.
Can you hear me?
I do now, yeah. I've been kind of holding off until you got in. You want to go discuss this a little bit further?
Yeah, so I just want to say you explained everything phenomenally. with the time series, one of the great things about the Twitter data is it tells you the exact date and time that it was tweeted. And so using that information, because they give it to you by the hour, minute, etc., you can plot this pretty easily. So that's one fantastic thing about the open data that the Twitter API provides.
Yeah, thank you for that. And really, I'll just, because we're going to discuss this anyway, I just want to cut it short, but that January segment kind of indicates a turning point in the season that has got a lot of Knicks fans on a more positive trajectory, but we're going to cover that as we get there. So I'll move forward. Christian, if you want to just discuss this a little bit, if you're around. Yes, no?
Yeah, I'm here. We should be good now. So with this is pretty interesting because you can, once you have all the data, right? So, sorry, I should actually cut to this. So now we've moved more towards the Knicks Twitter activity, right? So with the help of Nick Rinaldi, we were actually able to get a developer's account and scrape all of the tweets regarding the Knicks from the entire season. So that went to be about 2 million tweets, which is absolutely crazy to me. And so one thing, there's two other columns that the Twitter data provides. One is language. So as you can see, most of the tweets are all said in English, right? And there's a lot of them. And then it's just a top 10 of the rest. So we have Spanish, French, Portuguese, Japanese, Thai, Turkish, etc. And so what I really like about this one is that the NBA has been trying to become more and more global. You can see that with like Luka Doncic and other players. I mean, Giannis, who is arguably the best player in the world right now. And so it's becoming a lot more of a global game. And this just goes to show that people everywhere are tweeting about it. And then the second thing is source, which I think is kind of cool. And that you are able to see where the people tweeted from. So most of the tweets come from iPhones and then Androids, etc. And I just thought this was really cool to share. And if anyone has anything to say, I'd love to hear it. Rob included.
I'll say one thing about that. I think a lot of people do love kind of live tweeting stuff, and a lot of people are watching on their TVs. So the quickest way to do that is through your phone or some type of mobile device. Personally, I could even attest to it. I would say that 99% of my tweeting comes from my phone. So I probably contributed a nice few 100,000 to that English tweet in the left column. So yeah, it goes to show just how widespread NBA fandom is. As a matter of fact, on the Twitter account that I have created, I have a few followers from different countries, France, Spain. I've got a couple guys from the UK that follow me. They interact and engage with me pretty often. So it's cool seeing that stuff is more widespread than, on the surface, where we're just used to America, but the NBA has in fact widespread itself out enough that a lot more people are engaging. So it's a cool little twist to the data here. So I'll move forward. And now we get to the fun part. So that is obviously a handful of wins and a sea of losses. We're going to dive into some of the other stuff that plagues the Knicks season, particularly their standings as we speak. Last year, they were the fourth seed, almighty fourth seed. They made the playoffs. They had home court advantage. Everybody was up in arms, greatness, madness in the streets of New York City. And as you can see now, this isn't exact, but because of after last night, they did lose. But they are now 12th in the standings, fighting for a play-in spot, which is not where a lot of us pictured the Knicks would be this year following last season. People would argue that it was a hoax last year. They look like they could be right. I'm not going to confirm or deny that. Christian, if you want to dive into this a little bit, since you pulled all the info, but as you can see, I got Trae Young and Steph Curry here, who have kind of had an unfortunate impact on the Knicks this year. Curry most recently because he broke a record of all-time three-pointers made against them, and that hurt my soul because Madison Square Garden cheered louder for him than I would say they cheered for Julius Randle at the time. And then Trae Young, of course, over here, who destroyed the Knicks in the first round and broke all of our little hearts. But if you look at this table here, the Knicks did, in fact, beat the Hawks 3 times this year again. So it's looking like it could be a fun little rivalry building. Christian, if you want to just take away your process
and I
of
think
finding
it's,
this.
Absolutely. So this was, again, we're using all 2 million tweets. And what I did was I just tallied the total amount of tweets per. What I did was I merged the game log data with the tweets. So I was able to match every tweet day with if it was on a game day or not. So this is only on game day data. And then what I did was I found out how many times people tweeted during the Warriors games, Nuggets, Hawks, etc. Then I tallied, the game wins, losses, total games, and then the average amount of tweets. So the Hawks have the highest tweets, 64,000. And Rob, you might argue with me. Yeah, I mean, that's your arch rivals.
Yeah,
and what I thought was interesting was that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
But the highest average is the Golden State Warriors. And now I actually think that this might be the most important slide on the slide deck, because if you look, the New York Knicks have not beaten the Brooklyn Nets. So that's very important to mention. All right, I'm sorry. That's the last thing I'll say.
I'm going to disregard that segment. We're going to move on. So I can kind of explain this, but I will let Christian still discuss how he pulled the data. As you can see here, though, that this chart kind of resembles the number of tweets during wins and during losses. And losses kind of takes a heavy lead here. And I think it's kind of self-explanatory because I myself am guilty of tweeting about 50 times after the Knicks lose, trying to rationalize what went wrong. And I think Knicks fans tend to just be a little extra hurt when their team loses. So we get to all sorts of hypotheticals and conspiracy theories. We start talking crap about the players, and it gets a little toxic, admittedly. But there is still happiness when we do win, and we do try to tweet a lot and kind of be thankful for the team and what they've done. But the losses do take a heavy toll. And Christian, I don't know if you want to just talk about how you came about these charts, or this chart.
Yeah, I mean, what I did really was, again, that so I had all the game log data and matched and had if it was a win or a loss. And then I separated and filtered for all the tweets that were made on wins and then on losses, and I just plotted them. And so I actually think this is pretty interesting because it seems like Knicks fans it doesn't seem, they actually tweet more when they lose. And so to me, if I am a player or someone on the team and I'm looking, I'm going to see always more negative comments or more comments regarding losses than wins. And I don't think that would be good for player or team morale, in my opinion.
You would definitely hope so, but it doesn't seem to change their behavior sometimes. But yeah, let's move on a little bit. Then we got the win-loss sentiments, the sentiment charts, which we visited earlier. And honestly, because again, I didn't pull this data, but when I saw that these charts were kind of similar in a way, I was kind of shocked because, especially in such a small network, you tend to really only see some of the same stuff a lot. And a lot of the tweets that I've seen in my time on Knicks Twitter have been resounding back and forth, flip-flopping. But the fact that during wins and losses, a majority of the tweets are of more positive connotation kind of shocked me. I guess it kind of shows that some fans can be rational, and I'm not one of those fans. But yeah, I don't know. Christian, if you want to just go into that a little bit.
Yeah, again, I'm not going to re-explain any of the lexicon of sentiment analyses or how we pulled all that. Again, now this is just based off of particular circumstance. But it's important to mention that these two graphs, because there's more losses than wins, more tweets during losses than wins, that the scales are different. So their higher sentiments are on when they lose. But I mean, yeah, Rob explained it pretty fantastically that these are they are very similar to each other.
Thank you. All right, let's get moving then. And this comes to the major topic because the sentiments in this presentation are very heavily skewed for Julius Randle. As you can tell by our friend in the bottom right corner, a lot of people have been very mad with Julius this season. Again, most improved player last year, and he has kind of been underwhelming. Though recently, as the timing of this presentation, he has been doing a little bit better. But there was demands for trades at one point, talking about sending him to the G League, cut him from the team. Who knows? His wife's gotten involved on Knicks Twitter and kind of been coming to his defense. So, he's been creating a stir. And as you can see here as well, this is revisiting the lexicon and analysis of words involved with tweets about Randle. Christian, if you want to just talk about a little further what you found, obviously I can see, but you know more the special stuff.
Yeah, so obviously Randall's going to be the top word, right? Because in order to identify if a tweet is talking about Randall, it's going to have either Julius or Randall. And I would say that most people refer to him as Randall. Three things that I find interesting about this are, one, the word trade is in the word cloud. And as Knicks fans know, I mean, they flip-flop on the man hard. They're always talking about if he should be traded, if he shouldn't be traded. There was a lot of rumors about him getting swapped at the trade deadline. And then another thing that I'd like to mention is that RJ Barrett is pretty heavily used here. And so, I mean, those are really the tag team guys. And I don't think it's really a coincidence. And then I said three things, excuse me. So there's a lot of people's handles in this one. So you can kind of see who are the main people talking about Julius Randle in this word cloud. And that's it.
Yeah, it's funny enough. I'm just looking at that now and seeing that you're right. Christian, this is all you as well, my friend, because you got the sauce for this.
Oh, man. So this was probably the funnest part for me, right? So I actually wanted to see if there was any relationships between the tweets and NBA stats. So what I first did was I took all the numerical, right? So we're talking points, rebounds, assists, turnovers, field goal percentage, etc. And I wanted to see if any one of those and his performance is related to the number of tweets that he has on game days, right? And I found absolutely nothing. Doesn't matter his points on that game day, his averages, nothing. Then I wanted to see if there was a relationship between if the team won or lost and the amount of times he was mentioned in the tweets, nothing. I did T-tests, ANOVAs, chi-squares, everything. With the Julius Randle data, there is no rhyme or reason to why people tweet about him. And so this really hits home. I mean, I guess this really means that Knicks fans are somewhat erratic about their feelings about him. As I can tell right now, there's really nothing about Randall's play, the team's success or non-success, their opponent, that directs the tweets and how people talk about him. So I really am still perplexed at their feelings towards Randall in general.
But it's a fair concern to have. But this is kind of plays a part in it. Again, most improved last year. His points per game have dropped. His field goal percentage has dropped. His assists have dropped ever so slightly. He's still kind of active on the point forward market, though. And, you know, I guess it's just the whole thing that fans look on the outside looking in, have expectations. And then when those expectations aren't met, you know, things go out the window. So that's why you see a lot of from the previous information and data that responses are kind of up in the air and, you know, like Christian said, flip-flop back and forth because people see one Randall one game and they're happy, and then they see another one the next. It's comparable to how these charts show that, you know, he underwhelms, and then the responses are typically negative. However, we get to this, which shows that no matter what, Randall's sentiment are generally positive, comparable to the win-loss comparison earlier in the slideshow, which is just kind of shocking to me, again, because how I see all the complaints and remarks looks like it's generally more negative, but it looks like more of Nick's Twitter is actually positive and has a more positive outlook moving forward with him. That means that not everybody wants him traded. Not everybody wants him gone. Some people have faith in the guy that brought the Knicks back to the playoffs for the first time in a decade. But there's also faith in another guy, the Knicks' third overall pick, RJ Barrett, who has had an exceptional 2022. And that was indicated by the time series earlier in the slideshow as well, which is kind of what I was going to get into. His improvement in January kind of ties hand in hand with that spike in the time series. And Christian, take it away from here so you could discuss your word lexicon stuff.
Yeah. So again, I mean, it's cool to see that when Knicks fans are mentioning Barrett, that they're also mentioning stuff like 3 points. I particularly don't know if he is a good or bad 3-point shooter, but it seems like that's something they talk about. One thing is that there are more teammates mentioned. So we obviously have Randall, so that would be somewhat assumed. Then there's Cam Reddish, Fournier, Grimes, Obi Toppin, And so it seems like people are talking about him and the way he works with his teammates a lot. And then one thing that I like to mention the last thing I like to mention is that the Celtics are the only team mentioned in this word cloud. And so I mean, that means that whether he's playing against them or whatever's happening is that people are noticing RJ Barrett during the Celtics.
Well, for some context on that, he did in fact hit his first ever game winner against the Celtics, and it was one of the most electric moments of all time. I actually made it my wallpaper for my computer at work, so I get to see it every day in front of my face. Christian, similar to what you did with Julius Randle, if you want to just talk about this chart here too.
Yeah, so on the left, we see something similar. So I ran a linear regression model to see if there was any significant relationships between any of his stats and the amount of tweets that were tweeted about him on game days. And so unlike Randall, we actually see some things. If you look at this, right, two things that can help predict the amount of tweets said by him during game days are the amount of assists that he gets and his plus minus. For anyone that doesn't know, assist is helping people out on the team get points. And then a plus minus is to see the total amount of points that the team went up or down while he was on the court. I believe I said that correctly, but if I didn't, let me know.
Yeah, no, you more or less covered that, right?
So for any of the data analysis people here, we see that the p-value is 0.05, less than 0.05. So the model is statistically significant. And then we have the multiple R squared value, which is about 0.3. So that means about 0.29. So that his assist and his plus minus account for about 29% of the variation in the amount of tweets. We have the F statistic, and then the T values and corresponding P values for the individual assist and plus minus. So this means that, in my mind, this is indicating that his performance is driving some of the talk on Twitter to some extent.
Yeah, and from firsthand experience, and I'm sure if Rinaldi could talk, he could reaffirm it as well. I would say it 100% ties hand in hand. RJ Barrett's playmaking has been a lot of the reason that the Knicks have been kind of a talking point, or more of a talking point lately. He's been increasing his points per game, which we're actually going to get to right here. Rinaldi actually pulled this information on the left side of the screen here, comparing where RJ Barrett was last year for the past few months versus this year. And I mean, he's taken an electric leap, one that I think everybody expected this year sooner, but even the fact that it's happening right now is still cool. And as you see on the right, his general points per game increased over the course of his 3-year career. I mean, look, Knicks fans are high on him. I'm high on him. I actually have a jersey right here, for my second jersey of him, by the way, that I wanted to get because he's been electric. I mean, people talk about him like he's nothing. He was just omitted off of a top 24, under 24 list by Bleacher Report, which I consider disrespectful. Because if you've watched him for the past 3 months, you know that he is an incredible player. He's still got some kinks to work out, but he's getting there. And the tweet activity to correlate with this is definitely it makes sense. If you're looking at it from the outside. And then obviously we get to another sentiment chart about him. I don't really know why after a win there's a lot of negative stuff being said about him. I consider that just RJ Barrett hate from people that aren't actually Knicks fans.
Hey Rob, can I say something real quick?
Yeah. Jump in.
Yeah, so I was really thinking about this because this is the first time in the sentiment analyses that I personally can see like a noticeable difference between during wins and losses. And so I was like, man, like why is there a lot more negative stuff being said? And it's actually not, we don't know if it's actually about RJ Barrett, right? Because during a win, RJ Barrett could be playing great, and then the rest of the team sucks and people are mad at Julius Randle. And so they could be saying stuff like, hey, Julius Randle played phenomenal. Randle really sucks. We need to get rid of him, whatever it is. And so there's also a little more fear as well. But one thing that's cool is that there's a lot more trust. And so I think that Knicks fans, and again, I'm not the biggest Knicks fan. Rob and Rinaldi can attest to this a little bit more, but they're starting to trust in him a little more than last season or the season before. And I think that shows in the sentiment analysis.
Yeah, and just talking from a Knicks fan's experience, I know at one point earlier in the year, come to think of it, that would explain the negative sentiment here. Earlier in the season, he hit a very erratic, like horrible slump, and I think that's where a lot of that negativity kind of stemmed from. But ever since, he's been lights out. And I mean, he just had a career high 46 points against one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference, the Miami Heat. I was in a casino watching it, freaking out, and I'm sure everybody thought I was crazy because I was beside myself watching every bucket that he took go in. And, you know, seeing him climb out of that slump has just been honestly a resounding experience and one of the better parts of the season, despite the Knicks' struggles, which I think you see here with these charts and all the previous charts about the correlation. And now we get to the culmination of our presentation, which I'm sure Christian's going to have a lot of fun with. Who is the better fan base based off of the data? Get to it.
Oh, this is the best part, baby. I'm ready to rock. So the first thing is a time series analysis, just like the one we did on the Rambles from the Garden Twitter account. And so this one is particularly cool because you can see the two main spikes. The first one is in the beginning. And I mean, that is definitely coming from the double overtime win, which was the opening game for the Knicks against the Celtics. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the Side Talk videos, but that went extremely viral. You know, the term Bing Bong came out of that.
Going all the way.
Yeah, you guys wish. I'm glad Kevin Durant didn't go to the Knicks. And then the second largest spike is actually somewhat recent. And so anyone that follows basketball will probably understand that that was during the James Harden trade, right? So there was an insane amount of buzz. It was the most tweeted day of the season between the Knicks and the Nets. And I would make an argument that it was probably the most tweeted day of the season so far. And that's really all I have to say about this.
The one thing I do want to chime in, though, that is around the time the Harden trade happened, but it is also around the same time that people started realizing that the Nets were kind of falling down the standings and things are getting a little murky for you guys. Just saying.
Oh, here he goes.
Just saying. If you want to take this one away too, my friend.
Sure. And so this is just a comparison of the Knicks and Nets lexicon. It'd be cool to mention that with the Knicks, there was about 2 million tweets, and with the Nets, it was about 3 million tweets. And the Knicks, when I untidied it and cleaned it, it came out to be about 21 million rows of data. So that means that there was 21 million words, individual words said in the tweets. And so the problem with the Nets data, it was more, but it's hard to really isolate all of the people talking about the Brooklyn Nets and people talking about like Nets in general. And so I actually wanted to show how difficult this could be, because if you look at the bottom of the Nets lexicon, you could see Samsung Mobile and the word product. And I don't think the Nets have any affiliation with Samsung Mobile. And I've tried to do some filtering, but it's not perfect. And I just wanted to show or just display some of the downfalls of doing this sometimes.
Yeah, and also in that Nets lexicon chart, you see the Shams Charania, who's one of the bigger breaking news guys on Twitter. Him and Adrian Wojnarowski are the two kind of go like head to head with it sometimes. He works for The Athletic. That kind of ties in with what Christian was saying in the last time series chart about the James Harden trade. I mean, there had to have been hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of likes and retweets and reshares of that tweet regarding James Harden getting sent out and Ben Simmons coming to the Nets. Ben Simmons, who, by the way, has yet to play a game. Just saying. But
soon he's going to be dunking on the Knicks.
I do also find it kind of funny how different the lexicons here are, because there's a lot of stuff clustered around for the Nets, and everything on the Knicks is just kind of like, just boring. But it kind of makes sense. You know, the Knicks aren't the greatest, but and then here we are, I believe, for the final.
This is the icing on the cake, baby.
This is the icing on the cake. This is the final moment for you to feel good about yourself as a Nets fan.
I mean, yeah, and I felt this way before, that I thought Knicks fans are very harsh on their team and erratic, and you know they're one day, the next day, and can be very negative about the team. And these graphs show it, right? There is almost a one-to-one relationship between the amount of positive and negative words said about the Knicks, whereas the number of negative words is significantly different or lower in comparison to the positive words. There's also higher in trust. And so I think that this settles the debate that the Nets fans are the better fans in the city.
I'm going to argue that you added a little extra tweets in there of positivity yourself before you finish this presentation and this chart. But yeah, I mean, the numbers don't lie. And honestly, like I said, I could attest to it as a Knicks fan. I do get a little up and down, back and forth with them. And you do see a lot of people kind of just being like negatively minded, but it's also because we anticipate a lot. I mean, the Knicks haven't won a title in 50 years. Come on. So I feel like people got to understand that that's where it comes from. We got to see something brought to New York, and we don't want it to be Brooklyn. No Brooklyn for me. And I believe that is all. Sorry, Christian. Just can't support you on that end. But that's all from us, folks. And we appreciate you coming and watching. It's been a good time.
Thank you. I don't know if anyone has any questions about anything, wants to talk about anything, more than welcome to. I know the chat's been buzzing a little bit.
Would love to chat. Would love to answer any questions, mouth off any Nets fans that want to talk smack to me right now.
I also know it went overboard, so we apologize that it went a little over.
Yes, sorry about that.
Kevin, what tools? That's a very good question. So the main tools that we used were Python, R, and Excel. So for instance, all of the data concerning Rob, because it wasn't as big, we use with R. So with R, so far, you can only pull the tweets from 7 to 10 days from the pull date. So I can only tweet 7 to 10 days from today. However, Nick Rinaldi really came in clutch, and with a Twitter developer account, we were able to pull all of the tweets mentioning the Knicks from the beginning of the season, and that was using Python. And then, and then we used a little bit of Excel, some CSVs, and that's really it. Mark, can emojis be captured? So there used to be a Twitter package in R that allowed you to do the same thing, basically like a lexicon analysis or like a tallying for the number or which emojis were used. Unfortunately, it no longer works. I do not know if there's one similar in Python, but it is possible.
I was just kind of reading through the chat myself, and Oliver even asked he wonders if there's a relationship between win-loss record and mentions by teams across the league. Nets are having a better season. We're expected to be even better. To be perfectly honest, I would say because the Nets have a more positive record that, I mean, I can't attest to it because I didn't do the data stuff, but I would say that there's definitely less concern. I mean, Durant was out for a little bit. Kyrie Irving was sitting out. So now they know that everybody's kind of just back and good. And whereas the Knicks have been kind of good all year and they just suck. So Knicks fans are just able to, or like they're more want to start tweeting and being like, what the heck's going on? Gets crazy. I can imagine that Knicks mentions are definitely higher because of the negative connotations of everything. Kind of just looking through myself.
There was a question about TweetDeck. I'm not exactly sure what you mean by the question. That's the mom.
No, thank you. This is a great presentation. No, I was just wondering if, because I think I have TweetDeck on my computer, but then I just usually do it off my phone. I just didn't know if there was any difference between if it would be better for like getting your tweet notice by using TweetDeck or following things than just using the app on the phone. I mean, if you could speak to that, I know it's kind of maybe outside of this conversation.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. So it doesn't matter where you are actually tweeting from because they'll tell you the source and all the data will be compiled the same way and pulled the same way. As far as anything besides that, I do not know specifically.
Okay, thank you.
And then there was a question about management. Do you mean like the people that are in charge, or like do you mean the coaching staff and etc.?
Hi, this is Mike. What was the fan reaction to World Wide West versus the relationship with the Nets and Joseph's side?
Yeah, well, that's actually a good question because as you saw that there was like the difference between the lexicons and Rob, I don't know if you want to go back to that. And it's funny that you mentioned management because like one of the top words used for the Knicks are like Ric Flair and Randy Orton, who are wrestlers and have no affiliation whatsoever to the Knicks. And so when it comes to management, like it doesn't necessarily seem that people are talking about it on either side. I don't know if you have a different perspective or there's anything that you see that I'm not seeing right now, but it doesn't seem like there's any relationship between.
Yeah, it is funny that you bring that up because I being around it so often, I do see Knicks talking about like front office and management a lot, but I very rarely see Joe Tsai and like the GMs of the Nets and anybody from the front office really mentioned. And that actually is kind of funny. I wonder why that is.
I don't know if I missed any questions. Did I? Oliver, your question about bench players would be interesting. So I actually would like to do something concerning that, and maybe one of the rookies like Grimes or someone that Rob like would know more about than I do, because there has to be. And it's interesting also that like Cam Reddish was said a lot because he was traded and he was a bench player. So there's definitely going to be a difference. It would just be like, I think a little bit more difficult, but maybe not. But it's definitely something that we could look into. I
would say the Reddish stuff being so frequented, though, is because RJ Barrett and Reddish were teammates in Duke, and they now got reunited on the Knicks. There was even speculation when they both got drafted that Reddish would be in the top 3 draft picks, and he fell down to like 10th. So seeing them come back together and being a team again was kind of like a lot of, I would say, is the activity for why his name is so commonly mentioned. Quentin Grimes earlier in the slideshow, as you saw through my lexicon analysis, like I mentioned him a lot because I saw 1 minute of him play in the preseason. And I was instantly sold on him being a valuable contributor to the team. And then when RJ Barrett went down with COVID earlier in the season, started watching him more because he started for like 5 games in a row, and he was incredible. Nicholas Rinaldi isn't in the chat anymore, but we went to the Bucks game actually, where Quentin Grimes first started and scored like 27 points. And it was one of the most electric games I've ever been to. And I like to Oliver's point about bench player performances. I think for Knicks fans, especially if you looked into that stuff, that data, you would see a lot of hype and positivity because we love our bench guys. They're all incredibly talented. And they're also just, they're showtime, man. Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickly, Grimes has his moments. Cam Reddish has even been having his moments lately, but he got hurt. So that's a dub for the rest of the season, sadly.
I also want to say that I actually think there's a lot of like this data can be highly utilized, not only for marketing purposes, but like for psychological as well. Because if you are Julius Randle and you see like you shouldn't go on Twitter if you're Julius Randle, right? But if you see that if you had a good game, people are still talking about you badly. And if you have a bad game, people are still talking about you badly. Like that is really harmful. And if you see that, I mean, the opposite for RJ Barrett. And then when you have all these lexicon, like incentive and analysis, if you were a part of the marketing or strategic or business analytics, like this can really be useful because if I know what the Knicks fans are tweeting about, what words and how they're feeling, I can cater to them and I can then use words that they're using and assimilate better and feel the way they feel. And so I think that that's a highly utilizable topic that could be done with these types of analyses. And one thing that I really love about Twitter data is that it's real, right? When Rob is making a tweet, he's tweeting how he feels. And so this kind of works perfectly for sports, in my opinion, especially basketball.
Yeah. I'm hoping you see this. I went back to the Randall scandal slide because I used that particular picture for a reason. At one point in the season, Julius Randle gave the fans a thumb down while they cheered, but it was because either a few games before or that exact game, there had been some boos. And he was just kind of like, I've had it with that. And that sparked a little bit of a negative response, but it was in the context of the bigger picture as well. There were some other events that happened leading up to it. And that's actually part of the reason why I was so shocked that the sentiment about him was so positive still, considering that I saw a lot of negative response to this thumbs down moment, which is really not that big of a deal for most people. I didn't really take much offense to it. I mean, we're fans. We talk a lot of smack about these guys. Like, we could go out, play 38 minutes on an NBA court and score even 1 point. So, but I really only brought this up because Christian mentioned something just now that I wanted to go back and reference this. Yeah, Esteban, to your Thibs point, we actually omitted some Thibs slides. There was a little bit of an analysis on him because there has definitely been negative response to him. Of late, he's been a little bit better, but generally speaking, I mean, substitutions, coaching decisions, challenges that are deemed successful, but really he still loses them. He's a mess this year, also coming off of a major season, coach of the year last year, which kind of took everybody by surprise, I'd say, because Monty Williams and Quinn Snyder were the favorites, and somehow he snuck his way in there. Just shows how narratives play a big thing in the NBA.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I mean, obviously we ran out of time, and if we would have mentioned Thibs, we would have went way more over time. But I think if I remember correctly, one of the biggest differences in like the win losses in any of the lexicon or sentiment analyses regarding Thibs is that there was a difference in trust. And so that to me made a lot of sense, because your coach you're supposed to trust more than anyone. You're going to trust him with the team, right? When to switch players out, rotations. And it's funny that trust was the biggest one with Thibs, because he is very well known for overplaying his players, especially in his Chicago Bulls era when he had Derrick Rose. People say that maybe some of the injuries were because of that. And on the Knicks, you know, this has been something that has been talked about a lot.
Correct.
And that's something that's interesting.
Yeah, from even before he signed. I mean, on the Rambles from the Garden website early on, I wrote a little something about how I felt about Thibs being signed. And I mean, just recently when RJ Barrett went down with an ankle injury during a blowout loss to the Nuggets, and he was in there with like 10 minutes left in the game and they were down 25 when really there's no reason for him to be out there. Yeah, Esteban, it's that just put into perspective, like, what the hell is going through this guy's mind right now. I mean, you know, he's stubborn as a bull. I actually put as a little bit of a blurb there when we had the slides in, obviously as a pun for when he coached the Bulls. And he truly just, some of his decisions are crazy. I mean, what do we know? We're not an NBA level coach, but I mean, from the outside looking in, I feel like he's got to take some of this into account. Know when to play your players, know when not to play your players, stuff like that. Very stubborn guy, I'm telling you.
One thing that I'm looking forward to, and hopefully we could do something similar next year, is I'd like to see the difference between this year, and next year. So I'd like to compile all the data and see if there's a difference and compare that to how they ended up, etc. And we actually have access to every single tweet from 2006. We have a monthly quota. I believe it's like 10 million tweets we can scrape, but we could do something as like analyze every single season against each other that they've ever had since 2006, pull all the data and see what's up. The problem with that is that like Twitter wasn't as big, obviously, in 2006 as it is in 2022. So it would not be as fantastic, but it'd still be something interesting to see. And I think that's it. Rob? Esteban? Rob?
Esteban did just do one last question. What about Twitter polls? I didn't, what's funny is I made a few Twitter polls throughout the year, but I never considered that as something to look into. I don't know if that would get captured. Christian, do you know by any chance if that came up at all?
I don't know if the polls are accessible. They may be, but if so, it'd probably be through a different way. So like the two ways that we pulled data were one by user. So when we pulled your data, we just got all the information on you. And then the second was pulling based off words, which was Knicks and Nets, Randall, etc. I don't know. There may be a way to like pull all the polls, maybe even from particular people or regarding the Knicks or whatever. But that's a good question.
And to be perfectly honest, though, I've seen a lot of the Twitter polls, and some of them are just ridiculous. I mean, I've even contributed some ridiculous ones myself. So I don't know how valuable that data would even be, come to think of it.
Actually, and that's a good point. I actually think that no matter how ridiculous, it'd still be good data because it shows, I don't know, maybe the true self of the person is that hey, you could be ridiculous. It's Twitter. What do you really feel? And that's why I really love the Twitter data. And I actually think the sentiments are truthful is because it's hey, I can tweet whatever I want. If I'm feeling this at the moment, this is what I'm going to say. And at the moment, at the very least, it was right. So that's my personal opinion on Twitter data. And obviously people can feel differently.
Yeah, man. Hopefully we answered all your questions as best as we could.
Yeah. And Mark, I believe, mentioned public policy. And so that is actually thing that Oliver and I were speaking about one of the first times that we were talking, because we could do this for New York City. For example, I could pull all of the tweets that mention Eric Adams, the new mayor, and we could see how the city really feels. If the city implements, I don't know, a new subway or a new subway line or something, we could see hey, how do people do? How do people really feel about this? And it's much better than sending out a poll, right? Because think about everyone's this percentage of people feel this way. And I'm but I've never been polled. And I obviously know that that's part of the polling system, has to be randomized, but you could trump the polling system by pulling all of these tweets and seeing how people feel. Now, what's also interesting, and we weren't able to use this because there was almost no data, but they also provide latitude and longitude for Twitter data. So geographical location. And so if there's enough, you could map out where people are tweeting from, whether it's New York City, whether it's from New York State, Texas, Germany, etc. And so you can see how large of a scope, if the data is available, this really goes. Oliver, is there anything that you want to say in terms of Open Data Week or any closing remarks?
No, nothing to wrap it. Nothing from me. I see in the chat here, Rob plugged his Twitter, RFTG blog and at RB3Peats. So definitely, if folks want to continue the conversation with you, I recommend they get in touch. Otherwise, I know we have to turn over this Zoom room to another event in a few minutes.
Yes.
So we'll have to wrap up here. But I wanted to thank you both again for putting this presentation together and being a part of Open Data Week.
Yeah, and I want to thank you guys. Thank you again. It's a fun opportunity. I feel like it helps bring out some exposure. I love talking basketball, so I don't mind doing it like this ever again. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say thank you to everyone. Shout out to my mom. She came and all my friends.
Yeah, I saw her login.
Yeah. Shout out to mom. Ironically, I would put my social media handles, but I don't have any social media, and I'm the one doing all the social media analyses.
Yeah, man.
So,
you made your first tweet just the other day to promote this exact event. I
know. And if I didn't have to, I wouldn't have. But again, I want to thank everyone. It was so much fun doing all this and talking to everyone. Hopefully I'll communicate with you guys through Rob, and you should definitely check out the Rambles from the Garden blog. My man Rob is an awesome guy.
All the details are in my Twitter.
Yeah. I mean, I am an above average NBA fan, and I still learn from him every time I read his stuff. So
I appreciate the kind words, my friend. But again, thank you all for stopping by. Really appreciate it. Love being a talking head for some people that also love ball, love hoops. I definitely feel free to engage with me on Twitter. I mean, I'm on there pretty much every day. It's one of my favorite social medias, to be perfectly honest. As Christian said, my website's on there. I got the account up and running for 2 years now. So just trying to get a network, build a network. Got a whole bunch of stuff going on there. So again, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for having me.
All right. Goodbye, guys. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Great job, guys.
Take care, Esma. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Great job, guys.